I said, well, this looks like a possible candidate for Adshusheer. So we came out here not trying to find the graves, not wanting to find any graves, but understanding that Native people at this time period generally buried their dead in and around their villages. So that what these graves washing out told us was that there's a village here and there's a village here that dates to the historic period. The only site we have written information from about an historic village in this area was Lawson's account of Adshusheer. Adshusheer was a coalescent community of Eno, Shakori, and the Adshusheer. Groups that were kind of the original recorded indigenous population in this area. They preceded the Occaneechi, who were kind of late arrivals or were returning to this area in the late 1600s. Accounts from the 1670s, particularly John Lederer, mention and describe towns of the Enos, towns of the Shakori. He didn't mention Adshusheer. And it may be that the Shakori and the Eno at that time, they were on the trading path, which was where he was traveling. But Adshusheer may have already existed here, but wouldn't have been on his path in the county. So anyway, so that's, we came out here full of hope, and not a lot else other than that written account and just a suspicion. And so I'm like,
so these two 1 by 1 meter units that you see before us are really the end results of this field season here. We started out by doing what's called a shovel test pit survey. A shovel test pit is what you guys could all describe it. It's about the size of a utility bucket, about 30 centimeters in diameter, and we dig straight down until we hit culturally sterile soil. So we're not recovering any artifacts, and that varies. It varies across the landform. So it can be anywhere from 50 centimeters to 120 centimeters below the surface that we're standing on. And we dug these STPs, or shovel test pits, at regular intervals. So we dug them at every 10 meters up one transect, north-south, and then we'd move over 20 meters and dig another series at every 10 meters. And then based on our findings, in fact, Mariah, do you want to point out the shovel test pit with your foot? There's still one that needs a little bit more filling in. Based on what we found in these shovel test pits, or STPs, we then determined where we would do a little bit further testing. So we'd open up a bigger window into the soil to better understand the stratigraphy, the flooding events, the natural and cultural layers that we may have. Because a 30 centimeter hole doesn't give you a great view down into it. But we were finding some late period ceramics in the shovel test pits, a number of flakes. I think that's most of what was coming out of the STPs. The what? Charcoal was coming out. Is that if you can, that the upper sort of 30 to 40 centimeters, and you can see a sandy layer and then a more clay layer, seems to be both plowed material from the early 1900s. Because Sarah, right, this whole landform was plowed as a field during that time. And then a flood episode, and you can see a real sandy soil in the wall. In fact, it sort of breaks out really easily, so it's easily outlined above and below. And most of that material was clean. It was clean in the shovel test pits that we dug, very little artifacts. So in these pits, we decided our best strategy to get down to the cultural layers that we wanted, because we were finding artifacts deeper, was to remove the first 30 centimeters or so as overburden. So we didn't screen it, we just excavated it out. And that strategy was really based on our findings of the shovel test pits. And then you can see it slowly gets darker as you go deeper, with a very dark layer at the bottom and a sort of a slightly light brown layer above it. And that's really where most of the artifacts were coming from, as well as sort of the light tan above. But what we are finding are very late period ceramics that look very late in time. We have, actually, Mary Kate, you found this beautiful piece of a ceramic pipe bowl, a native made pipe bowl with roletting design on it that is very much a contact period style. And we're also finding these incredibly tiny, tiny triangular points, maybe the size of my pinky nail in some cases. I've heard them called bird points. And that's a very late projectile point or arrowhead point style. We did water screen all the lower layers, and we did not yet find any glass beads. Here, the upper levels we chose not to screen based on what we found in the shovel test pit, which was nothing. We screened the lower levels through 1/4-inch mesh, dry screened it, and you can see this is one of our back dirt piles. So the screen would have been over top of that, or the wheelbarrow would have deposited screen materials there. And then for the lower levels, where we were getting many more artifacts, a lot more cultural material, we chose to also then, after we 1/4-inch screened it, it went to the water screen, where we put it through window mesh. So we pumped water from the back channel with a gas pump, and we had 3 hoses going up and 3 different screening areas set up with actual window screens set over top of them. And we were getting a lot of tiny micro debitage, little flakes, a lot of quartzite.
We got one little sherblet.
Sherdlets, yes, which are ceramic sherds, but they're super tiny when they're called sherdlets. But no glass beads were coming out.
Yep.
And often if they're there, we still have the material to sort back in the lab, so there's the potential that something got missed. Some of these units had really sandy, gravelly, small gravel levels in them, but often the beads they pop out when they're there. So.
But if there's just one, that's all you need.
Yes, if there's just one, yeah, that's all you need. What we should see if there's a village occupation here is we should see higher artifact density. We should, at some point find features in certain areas. So, and talking about moving that direction, we lose these dark soil layers. They die out within 40 to 60 feet west. Yes, sorry, meters, 40 to 60 meters.
There was also the absence of any animal bones or anything like that.
Yeah, very few botanical remains, some charcoal. So one of our concerns was that the flooding had scoured away the village occupations, which is still a possibility. However, we do have this buried, Paleo A. It's hard for me.
And the artifacts, we're really at the very edge of the occupation, whereas if we move kind of upstream, up to the west, that we get more into where the village was, but that soil no longer exists. It's been eroded away, and all you would have would be the bases of post holes and pits and things that intruded below that. So it may be that you can't have both. That the village is not where the buried A is, but the buried A is close enough that it's giving us a hint of what's nearby.
And the other interesting feature is we don't know we know based on Lawson's account that Adshusheer is a coalescent community. It has at least 3 different American Indian groups or tribes, Adshusheer, the Eno, and the Shakori. And we don't know what this coalescent village could look like. It could be a series of clustered homes across the landform. It could be a single village. So that's the other interesting aspect, is there's certainly the possibility that we have groups who have come together on this landform but aren't in, say, a palisaded village of sorts that we would see along the Eno River at the Frederick site or the Jenrette site. So that makes it really interesting for me, is what does a coalescent community look like at this time period.
And the newspaper account mentioned the glass beads and the burials, but on sites of the historic area, you find glass beads everywhere. The glass beads, they're not just placed in burials, they're sewn in designs on garments, strands break, beads fall to the ground, and you know, in like mid-18th century Catawba towns, you know, it looks like it's just raining with beads. You can't dig anywhere without finding glass beads. For sites, you know, earlier in the 18th century and the late 17th century, you'll find beads, but it may be that, you know, the density is so low that in any given unit you may not find any. So I think that, you know, in terms of the information that we have, even in the absence of glass beads, that one pipe fragment is almost as good as telling us that this is a contact era occupation here. John Lederer, who is traveling through this area in 1670, he writes a little treatise to traders in terms of, you know, what the Indians want to trade for. And it's glass beads, and the color that they want may vary from year to year, and then there are other things that more remote Indians, you know, are happy with the trinkets. Those who are closer to the English settlements are more demanding of weaponry, of muskets, things of that sort.
And with glass beads, there's also what's called down-the-line exchange. So you might have certain groups who have direct access to the glass beads and other trade goods, and they're then trading with other American Indian groups, and glass beads are being filtered out in terms of what gets through, what doesn't, what colors get through, what colors don't. Glass bead research was my earliest research, and I would love to come back to it. You have to have really special sites to have glass beads, and colors and styles and shapes and sizes all change over time. So you can often begin to date a site based on the glass beads that come out. Now, not all beads are great indicators of certain times. There's certain styles that span, you know, decades or centuries or more. But there's more and more work being done doing chemical analysis to look at the composition of the glass, and then to link that with different countries who are manufacturing glass beads, wash everything that came out.
Okay.
Because right now most of it's still covered in dirt.
Okay. I
I think
see.
we've washed maybe we've washed about 20-25% of the sample. The water screen material will likely have to be re-rinsed and then picked through.
Yeah.
So we'll actually go through everything that came out of the window screen with small tweezers, and we'll pull out any micro debitage. So debitage just being waste material from napping a stone tool. And we often recover really, really tiny pieces in the water screening. Who knows, there could be a glass bead in there that someone missed. And then we'll wash the artifacts, they'll get cataloged, they'll be analyzed, and we'll start drafting a report of our findings. And that will happen over the next year. And we've tested just a fraction. As we walk along this landform heading toward, is it Mrs. Brown's trail that takes you up along the ridge?
Yes. Yeah.
As we head down this landform, we'll get to see just how much we haven't tested.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah, our initial plan was kind of start here, and then if we didn't find anything, we just kind of keep marching west. At some point, we'd say, well, let's go to the other end.
Oh, yes. Okay.
And we got through 4 of these transects 20 meters apart. So in terms of the overall bottom, we're just kind of in a corner.
Yeah.
And,
yes. Okay.
And so, you know, spatially, our initial testing was much more restricted than we thought it might need to be to find something that we could then explore.
Okay.
In greater detail.
So there's maybe more in this vicinity here to
there's
keep
yes.
digging and exploring. Very cool.